Your Superior Self, episode 43.
Leadership is about creating a story about the future, and that could be tomorrow. Like if we're working on a construction site and I just need you to get some stuff done for tomorrow, then my story is of tomorrow. If it's I'm building a tech product and it's a couple years away, leadership is ultimately creating a vision, a future, a story that gets people to say, yeah, I want to be part of that.
What is going on, Superior Nation? I am Trey Downs, and this is your Superior Self podcast. I am a blue-collar worker turned into blue-collar entrepreneur, and each week I will interview inspiring influencers who will help you become your superior self. Thank you for joining me today, and let's get after it. Hey, what's up, guys? Real quick, I want to take a moment and talk about Alan Stein Jr.'s new book called Raise Your Game. Alan Stein Jr. is an amazing author and former Your Superior Self guest, by the way. Alan is a big supporter of what I'm trying to do with the podcast, and in his book, Raise Your Game, he shares secrets and principles of world-class performers that will help you elevate your game and achieve greater success. Raise Your Game will help you drill down on your answers to these vital questions like, what sacrifices do I need to make? What skills do I need to acquire? Whose help would I benefit from? What challenges should I expect? And what habits do I need to change? This book will be the initial spark to raising your game in every area of your life. Just to give you an idea of how impactful this book is, here are what people are saying. Kevin Durant, Golden State Warrior, NBA superstar and champion, says, quote, Alan played a huge role in my development on and off the court, and in his guidance helped me to get to where I am today. This book is a must-read, end quote. John Gordon, best-selling author of Training Camp and The Carpenter, said, quote, Alan shares what it takes to take your game to the next level. Raise Your Game provides tools, concepts, and strategies you can utilize today to enhance your influence and make an immediate impact on your team, culture, and organization, end quote. Do yourself a favor and pre-order Raise Your Game by Alan Stein Jr. on Amazon today. For more information about Alan Stein or the book, please visit raiseyourgamebook.com. Zig Ziglar said, I don't care how much power, brilliance, or energy you have. If you don't harness it and focus it on a specific target and hold it there, you're never going to accomplish as much as your ability warrants. I wanted to finish the year off strong with a powerful quote that has helped me recenter my vision on my goals. That quote has helped me all year put the energy that I need to put in on the podcast and on my vision of where I want to go. And I hope it does that for you. And today is December 31st, the last episode of 2018. And it's crazy to me to think about where I've come as far as a podcaster, as an interviewer. And it's amazing. Like, I can remember my first episode just being terrified and being terrible. And I'm probably still pretty terrible, but not as bad. And I want you to think about that. Like, whatever it is in your life that you want to achieve, just take that first step. And just like me, even though you might almost be at 50 episodes in your stage of life, you might still not be the best, but you're getting there. You're working. You're putting in the effort. You're building. You're growing as a person. You're going to be uncomfortable, but that's great. That's awesome. That's where growth happens. And I hope that you're there, and I hope that you're willing to go forward in 2019 and make the best of it. Just let's create something together. Let's get in there. Let's get our hands dirty. Let's keep the momentum going. I'm excited about it. I hope you are. I'm coming off a high as a father because my third child, Kara, was just born on December 27th. And today is December 31st, the day of the last podcast of 2018. So I'm so stoked, coming off a great high, and I want to carry this on to 2019 and make it the best year ever. I want to commit to being the best version of myself that I can possibly be in 2019, no matter what that takes, no matter what sacrifices, no matter what pain and suffering and uncomfortableness that I have to endure. It will help me raise the bar, and I'm going to try and raise the bar every year and maintain, and that's what I want for you. I want you to maintain and raise the bar every year of your life, and let's get better together. And let's finish 2018 off strong with today's guest, Mike Ganino. Mike has over 20 years experience in the hospitality, travel, and tech industry. He's helped grow iconic brands like Chow Now, Potbelly Sandwich, Let Us Entertain You, Yum Brands, Press Juicery, and Protein Bar. Mike has always loved creating the kind of employee experiences that drive bottom line results and improve customer service and attract top talent. Mike has also written a book called Company Culture for Dummies, which lets you in on what you can do to share the same culture that drives places like Google, Southwest, and Wegmans to succeed. So without further ado, let's get fired up over author, speaker, Mike Ganino. What is going on, Superior Nation? Welcome back to the podcast. I'm fired up over today's guest, Mike Ganino. He is my brother from another mother. He is the author of Company Culture for Dummies. He is the company culture and engagement expert. Mike, thank you so much, brother, for coming on the show, and thank you for your time. It is truly an honor.
Hey, thanks for having me, buddy. I'm glad to be here.
Mike, I really love what you're about. Could you give Superior Nation like a quick rundown about what you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm out here talking to people and leading workshops and sharing the idea that we can all kind of have better places to work. And often I think we think of great places to work and we think of Google or Amazon or Apple or Zappos, and it doesn't feel like something that like the average everyday person can have. And I think that's wrong. I think we can create really cool stories together. And I think company culture, by the way, is just a bunch of stories. It's the stories we go home and tell. And, you go to work and you go home and you say, how was your day? That's culture. That's story. And so I think we can create really great stories together, even if we're leading a really small business, even if we're, we don't have to be in a big city to have slides and nap rooms. And sometimes I see these things that people are doing to have a great place to work. And I was like, yeah, if work was Disneyland, it would be awesome for everybody. But what about the rest of us who have to like go to work and do stuff? And I think we could create that everywhere. So I'm out there talking about that, helping people create better stories at work. And I wrote a book about it this year. And I've just been out there sharing ideas and helping people create a place where everybody can contribute and produce great results. And I saw I just saw this place where this idea of like what is leadership, it became like a mantra. It became that we needed all the steps and all the program. And at the end of the day, I think leadership is creating a better story for the people that work with you. It's creating a story about a world you want to create together in a way that people say, heck yeah, I want to go be part of that. And at the end of the day, really simply, I think that's what leadership is. And so that's what I'm up to.
Crushing it. I love it. Why don't you go ahead and talk about your book, Company Culture for Dummies? Yeah,
so the book was really funny. I never, I'm like a lot of folks who are probably listening to the show. I grew up and, I certainly wasn't someone that I ever would have thought would have written a book. I'm from a relatively small town. I grew up in San Diego County, but in a very small kind of rural town in San Diego County where we were full of, it was farms and ranches, and worked at a Pizza Hut and went to college, dropped out of college and ended up in the restaurant industry like a lot of people do who follow that path. And I think, I never thought I would write a book. I thought it would be something cool to do. And a couple years ago when I sold a restaurant group that I was a partner in, and I was thinking, what's the next chapter? And all along when I was in the restaurant industry, I had been also an actor. I was doing improvisational theater. I trained at Second City in Chicago and a bunch of those places. And I was doing acting on the side, and I thought it was really fun. And when I sold the restaurant group, I realized all of the stuff that we were doing to create really cool groups that worked really well together on stage in the improv world and in the theater world, that was the stuff that it took to create a great scene. It was the same thing that it took to create a great business. And so I thought that's kind of cool. I wonder if I can blend those two things. And so for the last 4 years, I've been out there speaking and leading workshops on the stories we create with each other at work and how those create relationships and customer service. And so last year, the folks who do the Four Dummies books, so those like yellow and black books that have been around forever, the Four Dummies, like, I have, even on my bookshelf, I have like Wine for Dummies, and I've got Italy for Dummies for like when I was traveling in Italy. And so they came to me last year and said, hey, we want to do a book. And I thought like, well, that's kind of, at first I thought it was a scam. I thought like someone was scamming me, and they were going to say like, oh, you have to come to some event, or you have to send us your bank account, and then we'll tell you how to do a book. But so I was a little suspect at first of like, is this a real thing? And it was a real thing. They'd kind of, they saw what I was up to, and they thought it was interesting. They thought it was practical. My approach to leadership and company culture is practical. It's something that everyone can do. You can pick it up and try some ideas and see if they make things better. So they came to me in October last year, and I started putting the book together, and I just started going back and thinking about how had I seen things done. And so now we've got, 377 pages that cover everything from performance reviews to one-on-one conversations to how to hire, how to train people, and bundle it all in a book for everybody.
I have so many questions I want to ask you. I work in like middle management, so everything you just hit upon, I'm doing every day. And leadership is an important key. Like it is very important to be a valuable leader in my company. I want to know is how can you measure that? How can you measure where you're at as far as leadership?
Yeah, it's so hard, right? So leadership, and even if you think about it, customer service, all of these things are that are so important that really drive our businesses. They're so hard to measure. And so, I think at the end of the day, like my version of, someone asked me this week when I was out leading a workshop for a team on how to create a culture of great service, because they're a company that delivers service. And somebody asked me during one of the breaks, like, well, what is leadership really? Because it's so nebulous, right? There's so many books, there's so many topics, there's so many programs about leadership, and what ultimately is leadership? Is it any of these things? Is it 7 steps you follow? Is it a framework? What is it? And I thought, at the end of the day, at the most fundamental, simple idea, and I actually posted this today, leadership is about creating a story about the future. And that could be tomorrow. Like if we're working on a construction site and I just need you to get some stuff done for tomorrow, then my story is of tomorrow. If it's I'm building a tech product and it's a couple years away, leadership is ultimately creating a vision, a future, a story that gets people to say, yeah, I want to be part of that. Because at the end of the day, when you go to work, people have their own stuff going on. They're in their own head and they're thinking. And to be able to get them to take action, to get them to give their attention, to get them to contribute and give their best work, you've got to create a persuasive story that gets them to say, hey, I want to be part of that thing that Trey's talking about. How do I get into that? How do I be part of it? Because, I see so often a lot of people talk about engagement and a lot of, I get asked this by a lot of local small town businesses that say, hey, I'm just struggling with hiring people. I can't get people in the door. What do I do? And I think you have to create a better story for people about what their life could be like if they worked with you than if they didn't. Because the only time that we change, and leadership is ultimately about change, right? It's about getting, you're trying to lead into a new area. You're trying to get people to do something that's not done yet. You're trying to get people to take care of customers who haven't been taken care of, create new products, whatever the case is. And so to get people to be willing to change, you've got to compare what is today to what could be. And the what could be has to be more exciting than today. And that's ultimately, to me, the secret of leadership. It's about being able to communicate with people in a way that's persuasive and gets them to say, hey, I want to be part of that thing that he said is down the road. I'd rather be part of that than to stay here and not change. And to me, that's leadership in the most simplest form.
Well said. Give me one story right now involving you and leadership. Like, what role did you play in that, and how did you make it better situation?
Well, I think there's so many for me, but one of the early ones. I've been able to do so many cool things in my experience. I think one of the early ones for me that got me really into this idea was back in my early 20s. I worked for a restaurant group called Potbelly Sandwich Shop, and at the time when I first started in 2001. we just had like 7 locations, and it was this place that did like, kind of toasted sandwiches, like a lunch spot for $4 or something. And when I started, there were about 7 locations. I stayed for 7 years. Eventually, we had 200 locations when I left, and I was running part of the training department for all the new store openings and all things like that. And one of the things in the middle there, I was like a regional trainer, and so I would go from location to location and check in on them. And this thing occurred to me because I realized when I would go from, all of the locations had the same real estate stats. We had the same real estate team picking locations. We had the same values, the same training program, the same uniforms, the same service. Everything was the same. And yet when I went from location to location, they felt so different. The experience felt so different for the employees, for the customers, for the leaders. It would feel so different. And so I got really curious of like, well, I don't know. I'd always bought into this idea that if all of the programs were documented and all of the things were written down, then everything would be the same. So why wasn't it the same? Why did location A feel more energized and more exciting than location B, even though everything was the same? And probably if you're listening to this, you can imagine a time where you went to one Starbucks, you had a great experience. You went to another, it was a bad experience. And maybe even, I could think of that in my own town. There's one Starbucks I go to and it's always great, and another one I go to and they're always a mess, always. But they have everything is the same. The menu, the training, it's all the same. So what's different about it? And that got me really curious because I said, I'm out here as a trainer kind of selling the idea that if you follow all the programs, you'll have success, but that wasn't true. So what was the difference? And that's what really initially got me turned on to culture. And so me as a leader, I had to figure out, initially I went into back to the office, back to the operations team, and it was like, we have to address this. I've just discovered this thing, as if I was the first person in history to discover this. But to me, like 23-year-old me, I was like, oh my gosh, I discovered this thing. And, and I'm talking to people who'd been in the industry forever. Like my boss at the time was one of the very first employees at Chili's, like at the very original Chili's she worked.
Really?
And she was, yeah. It was kind of iconic, right? Like she was a waitress at the original Chili's.
That is crazy, dude.
Is that cool? Yeah. So I'm going in and I'm like telling this idea. I'm like this 23-year-old, like, oh my gosh, guess what I discovered? And, I'm sure she was like, yeah, like kind of swatting me away like a little fly. But I got super into it and I was like, okay, well, they're not listening to me, that we need to address the fact that the way in which we do things, the energy we put into it matters as much as this other stuff. And no one was listening to me. And I realized part of my job is not to just have facts and information. My job is not just to come and say, hey, here's what I'm seeing. Here's what I know. You should do it because I said so. But part of my job as a leader, and at that time I wasn't really like, I wasn't anyone's boss, but I was a leader because I had influence and I was in this regional trainer role and had impact on people's careers. And I realized at that moment that my job as a leader was to make an argument because I couldn't force anyone to do anything. Like I literally didn't have the authority to force anyone to do anything. I could certainly share information. I could certainly like report them or something like that, but I didn't actually have the authority to force people to do something different. And it was the first moment where I realized, oh, leadership is really about influence. Being a boss or being a manager or being a tyrant, that's about power. I can say, you'll do what I'm telling you because you have to. And certainly you can get people to mop a floor or fill out some paperwork or do something with force. But at the end of the day, you can't force them to care. And so I realized in that moment that my job was actually to influence people, that I had to make a case. And so that's where I started really digging into books and ideas. I went to the library back then in 2003. I don't think we had Google in 2003, and we certainly didn't have like, I think my cell phone was like a brick back then. So I didn't have a way that I could just look this up. So I had to go to like the library and I started reading about persuasion and how do you get people to buy into your ideas. And I started realizing that for me to be able to change anybody, I had to convince them that what they could have if they changed was much better for them than if they didn't change. And that was the first moment where I really, really kind of stepped into a leadership role. And so I went back to my boss and I just restated my case in a different way. And I reshaped it and I reorganized it. And I thought about, what did she care about? What was her version of success in the world? And could I communicate to her to do what I wanted her to do in a way that got her to say, well, I guess I should do what Mike's suggesting. Otherwise, I might not be successful. And that was the first moment that really hit me. And I got that that's what I was supposed to be doing as a leader.
All right, Mike. So this is the $1 million question. Do you think that people are born as leaders, or do you think that they are created over time?
No, I think you can choose to become a leader. I don't think you can be made into a leader. I think you can choose to be. This idea of a couple things. I do a lot of work with people around communication. So I'll go in and I'll work with an executive or a leadership team or a management team around the way they communicate, because if they're trying to get strategy done or something, then the reason that employees don't engage and don't like buy into something is because it just hasn't been communicated in the right way. And so I do a lot of work around communication, how we speak, how we share, how we present, so that people will buy into things. And so one of the things that happens is that people think, well, certain people are born great communicators and certain people are born great leaders. And yeah, certainly there are certain personalities that lend themselves to being interesting, and you want to listen to them, they're engaging. You want to buy into their ideas because they feel confident. But I think that that's all learned. I mean, those same people that we look at and we say like, oh, they're great leaders, they're natural born leaders. At some point in their life, they didn't know how to use a spoon either.
But that's crazy though to me. Like, how are you born with this leadership skill? Like you just said, like some people are better leaders than communicators. Like, don't you have to be a great communicator to be a leader?
Yeah, and I think that it's learned over time, because like my whole point is that these people that we look at and we say like this person is such a great communicator or this person is such a great leader, those same people, just like you and me, they didn't know how to use a spoon when they were babies. They didn't know how to walk. They didn't know how to do all of these things. And so they learned all of that. And so some people, I think, just learned to be better communicators and leaders at an earlier age. And so we tend to look at them and think, well, they always were like that. But they weren't always like that. At some point, they didn't know how to use a spoon. So they weren't always this person we look at as being such a great leader and communicator. At one point, we were all very similar. And they just learned it on a different path than other people. And so I think that great leaders, I don't even think great leaders and great communicators are made. I think great leaders and great communicators are people who decide to become great leaders and communicators. And I think the trick, because there's people who decide, I want to be a great leader or communicator and never achieve that. I think that the trick, the thing you have to realize early on is that in either one of those paths, the job is opposite of what we think. We think of a leader, we think of a communicator, and we think, oh, they have to just start doing stuff, start leading, start communicating. What I've seen great leaders do, and even people like yourself with your show and the people you bring on, you're doing it for your audience. It's that they're really great listeners. They're paying attention to what's going on in the world, what's happening in the world. Why are people doing what they're doing? What motivates them? Why are they choosing these actions? What should we be paying attention to? And before they try to lead or communicate, they try to understand and listen first. And that is what I think happens first. And then if you become someone who's a great listener, you realize that, when you go out to communicate something or try to lead something and it doesn't work, you listen to your audience and you say, okay, well, why didn't that work? I wonder, let me try something new. And that is how we all become better leaders and communicators, is by listening and adapting and listening and adapting.
It's really funny and really weird, actually, is I just read a little bit of the first 2 chapters of Richard Branson's book, The Virgin Way, and he talks about listening. And it's so weird that you just said that because there is a difference. I mean, you can listen to somebody and there's hearing somebody, right? So can you describe the two? Like, can you tell us how important it is, like, to listen to them? Like, everybody has that boss, right? That cuts them off and kind of chirps in a little bit and gives them their point of view. But like a leader doesn't do that. A leader will stop, even if somebody interrupts them in the middle of a presentation, like, we'll stop and listen to them and take it in and maybe not acknowledge it right then and there, but they're always listening. That tool of listening is so key because, one, you learn far more by listening than speaking, right? Like you can't teach yourself anything more or less by speaking on something you don't know, but listening is so key. Talk about that. Like, what's the difference between listening and hearing?
I mean, I think you hit it exactly. It's if you're really listening, I think the difference with listening is you're trying to understand what's going on for the other person. You're trying to do that. Somebody asked me like, what is the secret of being a really great public speaker? What's the secret of giving a great presentation? And I said, at the end of the day, you could be entertaining, and there's things you could do to tell a good joke, to be entertaining, to tell a story that people listen to, but to really like move an audience, you have to understand where are they at right now. You have to really pay attention to like, what's going on with them? How do they view this topic? How do they view the world? How do they view what's going on? Like, I speak at a lot of leadership conferences, and, if I just went in and said, well, the issue with a lot of times people want to talk about employee engagement. How do I get my employees to care? This generation, the millennials, the Gen Zs, whatever the case is, they don't care. I don't believe that that's true. I believe that the problem is we aren't creating an environment that is interesting to them. Now, I could come out and I could just say that, and then I'm going to like make half the audience not pay attention because they're like, oh, this guy doesn't understand how I see the world. Or I can listen ahead of time. I can do the research to say, how do these people see the world? What is it that how do they consider things? And how do I shape my argument in a way that will help them understand it, in a way that will, because we're always communicating, we're always trying to lead somewhere. We're communicating to change something. So the more that I can be effective as that, the more that I can shape my argument so that I know that you can say to me, oh, he understands me. He understands what I'm dealing with. And maybe he has an idea. Then I have a shot at changing you. I have a shot at getting you to follow. If I'm going to be a leader, I need someone to follow. And I can't get you to follow if I don't show you that I understand what you're feeling or thinking. And that same thing applies across businesses of leaders coming in and thinking, oh, I know the answer to X, Y, and Z. I just watched the other day. I was working with a client, and I went into their office to see, I was working on something, and I went in to see, and I was like, oh, I just want to sit in on this meeting. And they were having like an idea meeting. And they said, okay, who has ideas on this thing? And I watched 3 people in a row share an idea. And someone who was in a manager role in the room immediately, as soon as the person shared the idea, said, oh, thanks for sharing. That'll never work because of this, to all 3 people. And then the rest of the meeting, no one spoke up. No one shared an idea. And I saw the 2 of the people in a manager role saying, come on, everybody, we need your ideas. Submit what do you think? No one's saying anything. And I thought, well, it's really easy to understand why they're not saying something. Like, no one's listening to them. So why would I keep contributing? Why would I keep sharing my ideas if everything I say, you just shut down,
Do you ever do seminars for union employees? Do you do the difference between non-agreement and agreement employees where, obviously corporate is a little bit different. Obviously everybody has to show up and do that. But do you ever do leadership skills seminars for companies that still have union employees?
Yeah. So I've done 2 events where I did 2 events, one where I did it with the employees who were union members, and another where I worked with the employees and the managers. The managers obviously not union. And the big thing here is that I'm not talking about collective bargaining. I'm talking about you and me together today are trying to figure out how to take care of a customer. You and me together today are trying to figure out how to get something done. And so sure, there's agreements that we have, and there's rules around the way we work together because we have we have collective bargaining around the way we will work together. But at the end of the day, it's really still, even though there's a union agreement about the way in which work will be done and the way in which work will be compensated, while you're here in this moment, can I communicate to you in a way that gets you to say, heck yeah, I want to be part of this. Let me give my best. Let me give ideas. I actually was a union member in my early career. Before I was in the restaurant industry, I was in the airline industry.
Really?
And I was a union. Yeah, I was a union member. And I remember thinking, of course, you're protected in some ways as a union member. You have the agreements that the organization and the union have come to, so you're protected. And there's outlines of how you could be disciplined or how you could be rewarded, and when you got a raise or when you didn't get a raise. But I don't think that a customer experience, I don't think company culture, I don't think leadership is about any of those things anyway. Unless you're abusing someone. If you're abusing someone, then of course. But outside of abusing people, I don't think that, and taking advantage of them, I don't think that great leadership and great company culture, great customer experience is about any of the things that are covered in a union contract anyway. It's about communication. It's about collaboration. It's about having a clear vision of what are we trying to do here and why does it matter? And those things are not covered in a union contract.
Well, there's always like you have the managers that are not non-union, you have non-agreement employees that are managers, and you have the agreement employees that are the frontline guys. And there sometimes can be a disconnect as far as communication because some of the employees that are managers came from the craft and they're kind of looked upon as the guys that crossed into the dark side, I guess. And how do you become leaders? I mean, how do you portray that leadership role as a frontline manager to union employees that you came from that craft that might look at you in a negative light? How do you become that leader?
Yeah, I mean, it isn't that different from the restaurant world or the retail world or the hotel world. When somebody used to, and even in technology, I work with a lot of tech companies, and it's not different from someone who used to be a peer and now became a manager, and now all of a sudden they're saying like, hey, how long were you on a break, or how long was this going on? I think the difference is like redefining what we mean by someone being a leader. Like, do you mean someone who is checking in to make sure I didn't go on break too long, or do we mean someone who can communicate what we're all trying to do here, how we're trying to work together? And I think that the story that people tell themselves about someone became a manager and they became non-agreement because they moved into a management role. Certainly there are stories there, but there are negative stories, meaning someone went into that role and then they did abuse it and they became the other side. But there's also a lot of stories around people who are in those roles who are really effective, who really do know how to communicate, and we just need to highlight that more and look at what are they doing. And I would argue, or I would underline that what those people are doing, because there's a lot of them that are in those roles, that are in the non-agreement roles, who have really great relationships with the agreement employees. And I would look and say, well, what are they doing different? I would imagine they're not abusing their power. I would imagine they're not viewing their job as a babysitter. They're not saying, well, now that I'm management, my job is to make sure we're following the agreement to the, that of course we have to follow the agreement. I'm not saying that, but that the way that I manage is not by pulling out the agreement and pointing out to you, hey, you're not in agreement. The way that I manage is still selling you on the fact that we have work to do, because I think that leadership is a sales job. It's about selling people on the work that needs to do, because you can't force them to it. And that is nowhere more clear than, one, in a volunteer environment where people are volunteering, and two, where you have agreement and non-agreement environment, where you have a union environment where people say like, I'm here and I'm protected as long as I do the stuff in the agreement. That's all I have to do. Well, I see lots of companies that are union where I see employees giving a lot, where I see employees really caring, really giving discretionary effort. And why is that? It's because the management team there doesn't view themselves as watchdogs. They don't view themselves as babysitters. Of course, everyone follows what's in the contract, but they don't use the contract as the management tool. They use it when they have a disagreement. Hey, we're unclear on how this job should be paid, or when someone should leave, or what the requirements are for, vacation, or this or that or the other. But they don't use the agreement to manage. And that's no different than any other place when a manager uses a handbook to say, I'm going to manage by the handbook. Well, that's not great management. That's managing, that's kind of the lowest common denominator management. And that's the same in a union environment. If all I'm doing to lead you and influence you is pulling out the contract, then that's kind of weak.
Dude, you just became 100% legit in my book, because no, seriously, because like you just summed up like every leadership skill seminar that I've ever been to as far as non-agreement and agreement in like a couple sentences, and you're 100% right. So everybody right now who's in those type of leadership roles, go get his book, because Mike is 100% right. Where you pull out the contract when it comes to like as far as violations, like stuff like that, but as far as getting someone to do the work, he is 100% right when you become a salesman, because you don't want to pull the agreement out there. You got to get work done. You got to negotiate. You got to kind of give and take with that kind of stuff, Mike. Dude, that is legit, man. Great points, good stuff. And the next question I want to ask is, like, everybody wants to know, why is Chick-fil-A so good at customer service?
I don't know. I haven't done a lot of research behind the scenes of Chick-fil-A, but I can say a couple of things that I have seen, or that I've witnessed at least, and that I've done on my own, and that I recognize that Chick-fil-A does as well. I think they have a really clear So most companies, when they think of customer service, and even if you're out there and you're listening to this, and you think, oh, I'm not a company, I'm a a one person shop, or not a one person shop, but I'm a one location shop in my town, and we sell X, Y, and Z or whatever. The same thing applies. No matter, if you've got more than you working in your business, the same thing applies. I think that the big difference, and I write about this in the book, of like, the problem with most places is that they're not really clear on what a great experience looks like. Meaning, they outline the steps. So the steps of service are: you will greet people, you will clean the floor within X amount of minutes, you will deliver, you'll answer emails within X amount of time, whatever kind of business you're in. You create these rules of service. But service is not a rule. Service is a feeling. Service is an emotion. If you and I feel taken care of at a business, that's not because it was, we don't go back and say in our Yelp review, they followed the 8 steps, and so I feel great. No, we say, oh my gosh, it was so amazing. They took such great care of me. I felt so great. So if all we're doing, this is very similar to what we were just talking about with union environments. If all you're doing to manage a customer experience and an employee experience, I would argue that goes the same way. If all you're doing to manage that is following the steps, and you're telling people the steps of service, of creating a great experience, an emotional experience for other people, is to follow some steps, then you're missing the point. And I think what Chick-fil-A probably does well, what I always tried to do in my businesses, was to be really clear about defining what a great customer interaction looks like, what a great customer experience is. Because it's kind of like if we were in a car, if you and I hopped in a car, Trey, and we were at a stoplight, and we said, well, should we go left? Should we go right? Should we keep going straight ahead? Should we do a U-turn? All of those could be good choices. Those could all be, choices you would make with a customer. Like, what do I do? Do I handle it this way, that way, the other, some other way? What do we need to know in order to make the right decision about which way to turn? We need to know where we're headed. We need to know what it looks like. Like, where are we trying to go? If we run into a detour of some sort, for us to be able to navigate around the detour, we need to understand where we're going. Because if all we knew is like, stay on this street, just keep staying on this street, and then all of a sudden we run into some kind of construction and we have to leave the street, well, you and I need to know, where are we trying to get to in order to navigate. And the reality is that in these customer service environments, and honestly, I would even argue, even if you're in the government, we are all in a customer service job in some regard. And if you haven't defined that destination of what does it look like when a customer has gotten good service, if you haven't done that and all you've done is outlined, here's the steps we follow, then I think that's why service isn't so great in so many places. And again, I haven't been behind the scenes at Chick-fil-A, but I would imagine they have a very clear example of what a great customer experience looks like. So then their team knows how to navigate no matter what happens to get there. And I think they probably do a good job of taking care of the people that work there so that they don't have to worry about things, so they can just focus on the customer.
I love that. So Mike, I want to know, like, what is your destination? Like, you come from airlines, hotels, restaurants. Like, what is your passion? Like, what fires you up? Where do you want to go?
For me, I probably have a background like a lot of people that are listening to the show. My mom and dad were teen parents. So my mom was 15 when I was born.
Really?
And yeah, they were little babies having babies. So they were teen parents. And the statistics, by the way, in Southern California, so in this little small town we think of Southern California, we think of like the beach in Malibu and LA. No, there's a lot of other areas there. And so we lived in like a small town with like trailer parks up in the mountains. And my mom was like after that, my mom got a job. My dad got a job, and he was like a construction guy and then a trash guy. And my mom was, worked at like a candy shop, and then was a hotel, like a housekeeper in a hotel. And the thing I realized, and that was my story all along. Like I lived in a small town all the way through going to college. And then I went to college, dropped out of college, tried to become an actor, ended up in Chicago doing improv. I clearly wasn't a great actor because I ended up working in the restaurant industry again, which is the story of so many people who try to become actors. And then that's how, everything else I said about Potbelly and on and on and on. And what I realized was two really important rules for me, and these are the rules I just kind of keep living into even in the future, is we are responsible for the stories we choose to believe. Meaning, it would have been easy for me as a kid in this, and even as a high school student in this small town, working at a Pizza Hut, I think I made like $3 an hour working at a Pizza Hut in this small town that I lived in. It would have been really easy for me to believe that this is what there is. It would have been easy for me to believe the statistics about kids born to teenage parents and to say, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is the life I'm supposed to lead. And I'm supposed to become a manager at the Pizza Hut and just stay here. As a college dropout, it would have been easy for me to say, well, I don't belong running a business. I don't belong leading a training department or becoming a chief operating officer or being a partner in a restaurant group or writing a book. But I'm responsible for that story. And so I think that's the one thing, is like the stories we tell ourselves, we are responsible for, and we can change them. We can rewrite them if they're not working for us. And the second thing is that, in improvisational theater, so if you ever go to like an improv theater, like Second City, or, they're all across the country in all these towns, the fundamental rule that we follow to create comedy together is this rule called yes and. And what that means is that if you and I, Trey, were in a scene together and you walk out, and in improv, we don't have a script. So we don't have a script. We don't have props. We're just making up theater on the fly. We're using nothing to come up with something. And so the fundamental rule of improv is that we say yes and. That if you walk out and you say, hey, Captain, I can't believe it, that all of the whole flight deck has busted. I don't know what we're going to do. Then I have to agree that, yes, we are in some kind of airplane or shuttle and the thing has broken and I'm the captain. I have to say yes to whatever you said. And then my job is to add to that, to contribute, to heighten it, to explore, well, what else could happen here? And so then I add layers on that. And together we then end up creating comedy. Entire movies are created this way. Saturday Night Live, this is how they write the scripts every week. And so for me, as I look at the future, as I figure out where I'm going next, I'll continue to live by those two rules, which are I'm responsible for my story. And if I don't like the story, I can rewrite it. And two, if I keep saying yes and to opportunities, when someone asks me to be on a show, when someone asks me to write a book, when someone asks me to come talk to their company, if I keep saying yes and agreeing, yes, I'll do the thing, and how can I make this a really great experience for everybody, I know that I'll be successful. A couple things I'm really excited about now. I'm working on a second book, which is all about communication and leadership communication. I'm working with a friend. Another thing I'm really excited about, I'm working with a friend on a TV show. I don't know, these things, you never know what's going to happen. But I'm working with a friend on a TV show about going into these small businesses and small towns and really working. It's kind of like a blend of, they do these like business makeover shows, but really going in and showing how does the way that we communicate in our businesses impact our results. And if we change the way we communicate, could we run better businesses and have better outcomes? And so I'm working on a show idea with a friend on that, which would be really cool. And hopefully like Netflix or something like that will let us do a couple episodes. So those are things I'm excited about now. And I've got a whole lineup of going out and working with companies. And I just love doing that work, going in and really helping people communicate and work together better so they can get better results together.
Well, good luck with that, brother.
Thank you.
So when you were growing up, like your parents were younger, 15, did you know that? Like, did you notice that they were younger?
I think so. I think there were periods of times where I thought it was cool of like, oh, my mom is like the age of your older sister, like I remember, like I was born in 1980. And so my mom listened to the same music I listened to. Like we were both listening to like Michael Jackson and Madonna and Boyz II Men and Debbie Gibson and New Kids on the Block and Poison, and we were listening to like the same music because she wasn't that much older than me. So like the music that she was listening to, I thought was cool. Like she wasn't listening to like Neil Diamond or Fleetwood Mac. She was like listening to the stuff and the movies. Like the movies she was into were the movies I wanted to see. So I think there were periods of time where I thought it was cool, and I remember there were a lot of times where I wished, because you also. You when you're born, I don't know, often when you have teen parents, you just don't have the same things that other people have. And so I remember there were lots of times where I wished my life was like other people. I wished that, both of my parents always had to work. we lived in apartments. I never lived in a house until I was an adult. I never lived in a house until I was an adult. We always lived in apartments. And so I would see people that lived in a house and they had a pool and they had a yard and they had dogs and they didn't have to come home and sit by themselves and do homework. And, I have a younger sister, and so I would take care of her. And so there were times where I also resented that I wanted those things. But I don't think that makes me unique. I think a lot of people have that experience. And so I think I was aware of it, and sometimes I thought it was cool that I had younger parents, and then I was aware of it other times, and I wanted to have normal parents, whatever that meant.
Yeah. I mean, I think the normal definition is just crazy to me. I don't know. I growing up, I wanted to be normal too, but, normal to me is just bullshit. Growing up, like, you had younger parents, you didn't have a, by your definition, home until you're an adult. At what point in your life do you feel like you had that expertise of a leader, like to go out and speak and write a book on it?
I think so.
Is it the restaurant business that kind of like did that? Like the hotels? Is that what kind of sharpened that pencil? Was it like your life experiences where you had your sister, you kind of, did you watch over her? Was it like, just a ton of events that happened to you growing up that just kind of sharpened that pencil?
I think it's probably both, right? It probably was, I think, because of my experiences growing up. I think because of the things I was exposed to and the things I had to do and the things I saw around me. I think that later, when I had the opportunity to actually practice it as a kind of hard skill, like, oh, I actually could do leadership because I had people to lead officially, I think it probably made me more open to the lessons. I don't think I had, I never felt like, and I see a lot of people do this, I never felt like I had to be someone else to be a leader.
I love that. I love that. I want you to repeat that. Like, that is so important, dude. Like, you didn't have to be somebody else to be a leader. Like, you are who you are. You're Mike, right? Like, you didn't have to change. Like, and that's the thing. I think that people, they think of this John Wayne character. Like, they think of people in movies that, those are leaders. Those are what I'm supposed to be. Like, no, everybody has leadership qualities. You just have to be your own leader, right? Like, that I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You're on you're going in a great direction. I just wanted to point that out because so many people think that they had to be somebody else to be a leader.
No, I'm glad you did, because sometimes I say things like this and it's something to talk about, and it's like, you're right, this is something to talk about, because recently I was working with a client, a CEO, and this person comes across sometimes like very like, I don't care, like, hey, this is how it is, this is what's up. But when I was working together with him, I realized, like, this person is really sensitive. This person really cares about the individual stories in the company. And I would watch the way that he would interact with people and the employees that would come up and tell him, what was going on with their kid, and frontline employees who, it was like in a manufacturing setting, and people on the manufacturing floor who would come up and say, oh my gosh, remember the thing I was telling you about? And he's like, yeah, what happened with so-and-so? And he would remember their names. But then I would watch this person speak or give a presentation or in a management meeting, and he took on this persona of like, hey, I don't give a crap. Like, this is what it is. You're all going to take it or leave it. And I thought, those are not the same people. It's not the same guy. And I confronted him. Sometimes as a coach, as a consultant, you have to kind of call people on their stuff. And I said, I'm really confused by you, dude, because I saw this person talking to so-and-so about this thing, and you remembered the son's name, and I saw you talking to this person about this and that one about that. And then I watch you other times, and you're doing this character. I believe it's a character because I don't think it's who you are. This character of like you said, Trey, like this John Wayne, like, make my day, buddy, kind of thing. What's going on? And it's because that's what he believed a leader was supposed to do. A leader was supposed to be stern and hard and tell people what to do. And I realized that so many people believe that. So many people believe that there is a specific way you're supposed to be, that, like, even down to like, oh, you shouldn't be friends with your employer. You shouldn't be friendly with your employer. You shouldn't. So not true. And it's this whole thing about like, oh, someone's crying at work. And it's like, that doesn't make them awful. Like, if they're crying every day at work, then something is wrong and we should fix it. But if someone is emotional because they care about their performance and they're getting a bad performance review and it's bothering them, that's good. Let's use that. Like, let's not be scared of that. Let's lean into
Yeah.
that. This idea that emotions shouldn't be at work is so screwed up because we are social beings. We only work well as humans because we are social, because we care about each other, because we care how other people see us. And to strip that away, I think is so wrong. So this idea of people having to be a specific kind of person as a leader, I think we've got to change it. And I think for me, that is one of the things, your question was, did it start when I was younger and continue? Did it start? I think it had to have started when I was younger, that I viewed my place in the world as a certain way. But I think the biggest thing that it allowed me to be open to the lessons later when I became an actual manager, when I became responsible for other people's work output and for what we did as a team. I think that my early years, my upbringing, I had so much social learnings about how do we interact as humans? How do we get other people to do what we need? How do we communicate? How does what I say impact someone? I had learned so much of that growing up that when I became a manager, it was intuitive to me that the way I communicated would impact whether someone worked a certain way or not. And so I definitely sharpened that saw as a leader because I had so many more opportunities to leverage it. But I think I probably was given that as a tool at a much younger age.
It's powerful. I love that, dude. So how do you go from like acting to giving seminars on leadership? Like, fill in the blank there.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I think that we often view acting and we think as actors we think actors are pretending. They're pretending to do something. And I think that's when you see bad acting, right? So you watch, when we watch certain actors, we think, wow, that's really good. And other times we think this is awful. We go to a play or we watch a movie or watch a TV show and we think some people are really good and some people aren't. What is that? What is the difference there? Because they're all pretending to be something they're not. So what's the difference? I think the difference is that bad acting is completely not being willing to be changed by other people. That in a scene together, if you and I were in a scene together, we're playing brothers, that bad acting is me not being willing to be changed by whatever you say and instead pretending to be. So if you were yelling at me about something I had done and I had done something crappy to our parents and you were yelling at it to me in a scene, I could either choose to be like, oh, I'm going to choose to be defensive, or I could say, how would I actually respond to this in the moment? How would this person respond? And to really feel the emotional stakes in it versus pretending them. I think as actors, we choose roles. We make decisions about our voice, our tone, how we move, because it sends a message. It communicates with people. When we walk onto a stage, if we walk onto a stage and we've got our shoulders back and our chest out and we're very proud looking, that sends a message and a communication, and it says something. It sets the stage, literally. I think that as leaders, I think as communicators, there's a lot to learn from that. That we're always like, even for you have kids, right?
2 kids, 8 and 6.
And you make choices about the way you talk to your kids is different than the way you talk to me, which is different than the way you talk to your wife, which is different than the way you talk to, someone else. The way you've interviewed other guests is different than the way you talk to me. You and I have a different relationship than you did with the last person, probably. And those are all choices we make to get a result. You're communicating the way you're communicating with me to get a specific result, to inspire conversation, to get us to have a dialogue here on this show. When you communicate with your daughter or your son, and it's bedtime, and you're like, you know what? I was gone all day, and I'll read you all the stories you want. Like in your little heart, Trey, I will sit here and read all night long because I missed you and I haven't spent time with you as much as I would like to this week. So I will sit here and read stories to you all night long. So when they say, one more story, Daddy, one more story, you don't care because you're like, okay, fine, one more story. Even if you say, come on, this has got to be the last one, you're communicating in a way that is telling them it's okay, we're going to have this time together, versus on a night where it is like, hey, it is time to go to bed, dude. Like, you need to go to sleep. You choose a different
Monday night.
You choose
Monday Night Football, baby.
It's time to sleep. Daddy's got a game to watch. But you communicate differently. Your body language, all that changes. When you walk in the door and you say to your spouse, hey, how was your day? If the person says like, it was fine, that means something different than, oh, it's totally fine. or it was fine. They could use the same words. And so the thing that I learned from acting is that all of these choices we make create a different scene. And we are responsible for the scenes we create with each other at work, with customers, with employees, with other managers, with our own boss. We are responsible for our character in that scene. And we can make choices about that the same way we do in the rest of our lives. And it doesn't mean we're being phony, because you communicating with your kid, hey, it's time to go to bed. Like, we got to go to bed, lights out, versus, all right, one more story. That's not phony. That's you choosing the role to play based on the results you want. And I think we can learn a lot from actors as leaders to do a better job of that.
Damn, Mike, you're so good. I'm throwing you curveballs over here, and you're just crushing them. You're just hitting them over the left field fence. Like, has acting helped you as far as like your presentation skills, like being in front of a live audience, giving like talks? Like, I mean, you're very confident in your speech, and you're very confident in yourself. Like, I watched some of your YouTube and seminars. Like, you have a presence about yourself. I mean, did that help you with that?
Yeah, I mean, probably in a couple ways. One is that as an actor, as a performer, you're not just up there kind of rambling. You're trying to do something. You're trying to move the audience. You're trying to move the other character. You know, like I was saying earlier, if you and I were seen together, you were mad at me and I was trying to calm you down. My objective as an actor, as an improviser, really, in that case, would be to say, what do I need to do to get this guy to calm down? How do I need to be so that he'll calm down? So in one way, it made me really good at saying, how do I create an experience that gets what I want this person to feel? How do I show up to contribute to them feeling a certain way, right? So if I want them to feel motivated, inspired, if I want them to change, if I want them to be upset about like the way the world is, and I want them to be different, which is sometimes my job when I work with a leadership team, is I want them to be shaken up and say, this isn't good, we got to change this. Acting certainly helped me with that. I think, two, it helped me tell a better story. You know, in theater, in improv, and acting, we're telling stories. And so it helped me learn, how do you craft a story so that it's engaging, so people are interested? So for sure there. And then three, I mean, purely just by reps, by getting enough reps in of like, I've been on stage so much that it makes me slightly less, you know, I still get nervous because I care about what I'm doing and I want to make sure I do a good job. I want to make sure I've done really for me, it's that I want to make sure I've done a good enough job listening to this audience, whether it's through research or through actually interviewing a few people who will be there. I get nervous because I want to make sure that I've done enough work that I can show them in the audience that I understand what's going on for them, that I understand what they're up against, that I understand why they view the world they do, and that I'm not just here to preach to them and tell them they're wrong, but that, because that can come across sometimes like, you're doing this wrong, you should do it my way. I realize that I am not going to change anyone's mind if that's how I carry myself. So I think that for me, the third thing that the acting did is it gave me enough repetitions on stage that I'm pretty comfortable being up there.
Do you have any like pointers? Do you have any? Is there any kind of methods that you use when you stand up there? One, and like, what is your typical like preparation time? Is it like, do you spend a week getting prepared for one seminar or conference? What does that look like for you?
It depends. You know, a lot of times I often am talking about the same things, and I do this a lot. I do a lot of executive and management coaching on public speaking. So I do a lot of not public speaking like they're necessarily going to go to a conference, but they're going to be addressing their employees. They're going to be having an annual meeting, or they're going to be, you know, doing something. So I do a lot of work with them as well. And so in general, what I advise and what I work through them with and what we practice is, let's get really clear on what you're trying to do, because sometimes we sit down and we start with the slide deck. We start with the PowerPoint. We start putting up slides, and it's like, wait, let's sit down and think about, what is it that you're trying to, I always think of it as objective and intention. What is your objective here? What do you want these people to do? And how succinctly and clearly and concisely can we say that? I want these people to feel excited. I want them to feel pumped up about going out and doing X, Y, and Z in 2019. I'm doing a lot of work right now. It's the end of the year while we're recording this. And so a lot of work with companies that are getting ready for 2019. So I'm doing a lot of conferences and coaching on that. And so if your objective is to get these employees excited about the opportunities in the next year, the next quarter, the next day even, if that's your objective, then what is your intention? Well, I want to communicate in a way, I want to get them fired up to realize that the best is still ahead, that we've got a lot going. Okay, cool. Now we've got a clear objective and a clear intention on what you're trying to say. It's amazing, Trey, how many people stand up in front of people and they've never thought of that. They've never thought of, what am I trying to get these people to do? And in what way am I going to convince them to do it? They just stand up and they start telling stories and information and they hope that it works out. And then what happens often is we blame the audience because they didn't bite. It's like, well, they just didn't care. And it's like, no, you didn't even take 10 minutes to think about what you were trying to do. So of course you didn't have a chance at doing it. So I think that's the number one thing. So if you're listening to this and you're even going to get 5 of your employees together and talk to them, or hundreds of them if you have a big company, think about, what is my objective? What am I trying to get here? And then what is my intention? What's the way in which I'm going to aim to do that? And then the second tip, so I got 3. The second is, anytime that you're communicating, you are trying to change something, and don't discount that. No matter what you're communicating, you are trying to change people. You're trying to get them to give service a different way. You're trying to get them to build something quicker. You're trying to get them to clean the floor. You're trying to get, even with your kids, Trey, often when you communicate, you are trying to get them to change something or to buy into something. So get really clear on, what is it that I want them to change? And you need 2 things there. You need, how does the world currently look? And we need the current world to kind of like suck. Like, well, if things don't change, this is what's going to happen. You need to sell us on, oy, that doesn't sound so good. Well, what do we do instead? Well, then you say, well, guess what the world could look like? This is what the future could be. So you're creating this tension between what is and what could be. So what is and what could be, that is our job as communicators, is to say that no matter what we're trying to sell people on, whether it's leadership, a business idea, going to bed early, we're constantly creating what is versus what could be. And then the third thing, you asked me about preparation time. I think there isn't one rule I have for like how much time do you need to prepare. I think you have to think about, what are the stakes? And the stakes could be, there's if we don't get people to change, we're going to close down the business. Those are pretty high stakes. You better put some time into it. If it's, I just need people to put towels in a different spot, well, that's not as high stakes. If you are trying to go out and get fundraising, you're going to the bank and asking for money, that's pretty high stakes. So I think it depends, the preparation time, based on what are the stakes of the conversation. It also is, a lot of the things I do, I have, little bits and little stories. So I have an hour-long keynote. I have a full-day workshop. I have a 2-day workshop. And, there's certain parts of that are the same or similar. And so I've got these little bits, kind of like a stand-up comedian, where it's like, oh, I've got my little 5-minute bit about customer service. I've got my little 5-minute bit about travel. I got my 5-minute bit about taking my niece and nephew to Disneyland. And I don't need to practice those as much because I know them. Where I would spend time, if I was going to use my regular kind of bits, where I would spend time is saying, is my argument valid? Do I understand what the world looks like to them? Am I clear on what I want, what objective I want, the intentions of my talk? And am I really clear on what is going on today and what I think the future looks like, so I can communicate that? And I really double down on making sure that's really, really clear, because that's the only way I am going to get people to change. And I realize that no matter when and how I'm communicating, I'm trying to get someone to change.
It's tough. It is really tough, man. And to get someone to change, you really have to communicate like effectively. And I think you've done that the entire interview. I think that you have a gift. You every curveball that I've thrown at you, you have nailed like out of this park.
Thank you. Yes. I try to give a good show. People, people are giving me their attention. You're giving me your attention. You're giving me your platform, Trey. And the people that are listening today, they have given their time to listen to this. And I think it is my job to make sure that I deliver. And I do not take the fact that people are paying attention and people are listening for granted. It is, I cherish that. So I work, it means a lot to me that you said that. And I work really hard to make sure that I don't waste people's time, because I know it's precious.
I'm serious. Like you have probably been one of the best interviews where you have communicated effectively your message. And I don't say that a lot, and I'm being very honest. But like, tell me about like your first gig, like your presentation. Like, what was that for you? Were you like nervous? Was it a wreck? Did you knock it out of the park like you're doing this interview right now?
So it's hard to figure out when my first one was. I can say, because all along when I was in the restaurant, hotel, travel industry, a lot of times my job was a trainer. So I was always presenting. I was always teaching. I would be leading an orientation or leading a class on service or leading a new rollout of something. And so for a lot of times I was doing that. And then at the same time, I was on stage often as an actor and a performer. So it's somewhat hard to say my first presentation. What I can say is my first paid presentation on my own. So when I left and I was on my own and someone actually paid me to show up and give a talk, it was actually in a party room at a macaroni grill. That was the event space. So, that restaurant Romano's Macaroni.
I love that place. I love that place.
No, it's good. They've got that white paper tablecloth that you can draw on.
Yeah, I love that place. Well, how'd you get it though? Like, how'd they find you?
Well, no, it wasn't for that company. It was for. So I'd been doing consulting for a little while, and I was like, I'm gonna put a page on my website that says speaking. And I'm going to change my LinkedIn to say that I'm a speaker too, because I was like, I like consulting, but I really like teaching and I like speaking. So I'm just going to put it on my site and see if anyone bites. And this group reached out, and it was a marketing group and like an association, and they were trying to get more restaurant and retail and hotel people, marketers, to join the association. And so they said, ooh, well, this guy, he's been on a couple podcasts and he's a consultant and he's a speaker. So if we bring him in to speak at our monthly meeting or quarterly meeting, then maybe he can draw in some of these hotel, restaurant, retail people, and we can get them to become members of the association. So they flew me to New Orleans. They paid me. It was my very first gig, and it was like in a party room at a macaroni grill.
They flew you into New Orleans?
Yeah,
like, that's crazy, dude.
Yeah, it was cool. And I thought it was like such a big deal. I was like, I am such a big deal speaking in this macaroni grill party room. But it was so funny because as I was talking, like the server came in, and as I was speaking, was like, "Sir, do you need another Diet Coke?" Like while I'm teaching, and it was like, okay, like it was very. It humbled me real quick. It brought me back down to earth. Like, dude, calm down. Like, calm down. But that was my very first gig, and I was nervous in the same way that I said before. These people were giving me their attention, and it was 30 or 40 people. They were giving me their attention. They were giving me their time. They all have jobs and families and important things to do, and they were giving me 90 minutes of their time, 90 minutes of their precious attention. The organization was giving me their money and their platform. More than their money, they were giving me their platform. They were giving me their one meeting for the quarter. They were turning it over to me. And so I was nervous, not because I thought, can I do a good job? I was nervous because I said, I want to make sure I fulfill the promise I've made to all of these people. And so I did all my normal prep. I had it all organized. I spoke to a few of the people who'd be in the audience. And so it went really well because I did the preparation work to get ready for it. But it was definitely hilarious because I was like, I was really thinking, ooh, I'm like a major big shot here flying to New Orleans. And then I get there and it's like the party room and everyone's eating like bread, bread and olive oil while I'm talking. So it was a good place to start though. It kept me grounded.
That's still pretty sweet, though. I mean, New Orleans, Macaroni Grill, it doesn't get any better than that, bro. Your first speaking gig?
I think it's pretty cool anytime anyone invites you anywhere and says, hey, we want to listen to you. I think that's cool, like, somebody said to me about podcasts. They're like, oh, how do you choose and what do you do? And I said, at the end of the day, if like someone wants to talk to me, like I'll talk. Someone is willing to give me their platform. Like you and I were introduced by a mutual friend, but you're giving me your platform. Like it's my job to do good work here because you've taken the time, you've organized this, you've built an audience to listen to you. Like it would be shame on me if I wasn't ready for that.
Well,
Shame
let's be
on me.
honest, though. You only go on the best podcast, right? I mean, let's be honest.
Well, I'm on this podcast, so clearly I only
Clearly the
go
best.
on the best. Yeah, I will say this is like a mutual love fest here, dude. Because like you were very nice to me a minute ago. This has been one of the coolest interviews I've done. This is a really we've covered so much, and you really listen. And a lot of these podcast folks, I'm going to call them out. They don't listen. They just have their set questions, and they don't really listen to what you're talking about. This has been a really cool conversation. You're great at this.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Well, I really am like, I care about what you're doing. Like, like, I want to get better at communicating, and you are a pro. Like, I listen to you. I'm like throwing you curveballs, and I have a couple questions in my mind, and I love listening to your story. I just love connecting with people, and like, you seriously, like, when you speak, like, you are a professional. So I'm gonna throw you one last curveball. Like, if you were to talk to the 21-year-old Mike, what would you say to him? Like, to give him like a heads up. I don't know. Hey, look, this is coming at you, but or maybe something to do differently. Like, what would you say to yourself when you were 21 years old? Like, to give him like a heads up.
I would probably say, there was part of me that early on, maybe not. There was part of me early on that thought that, I had these ideas. I had these ideas about the performance side of things, the stuff I was doing as an actor and as an improviser and going to auditions while working in the restaurant industry. And very early on, I had ideas. I remember I was 21 years old and I was managing a Potbelly, and I had only been there like 2 months, and we needed to increase. We wanted to like kind of reconnect everybody with service and what we were doing, because people would get caught up with like they wanted to start closing down the stations and to kind of get a jump on getting closed or whatever, and it ultimately doesn't lead to good service because stuff's not ready and it takes longer. And so I remember they said, hey, let's do like an employee meeting and talk about it. And I said, in my head I was like, we're not going to change anyone's mind by talking to them. Like, we're not going to just yell at them and tell them you should care about customer service more. Like, that's not going to change anyone's mind. And so I said, hey, can I have that 45 minutes like that we have to talk about this? Can I take it? Can I run it? And my manager was like, sure, whatever. She was kind of, she was pretty cool. She was like, yeah, whatever you want to do. So I organized like a little skit, like a little sketch show of all these different customer service scenarios that would happen and why it was bad for us to be doing what we were doing. Like, starting to close early and clean up things early. Why that was bad. And instead of telling them about it, we created all of these little scenes. And so I gave everyone little characters. They had little characters on pieces of paper. I gave it all to them, and everyone had to act out their scenes. And it was very experiential to help us learn. And I remember then at 21 years old that it had clicked to me that a lot of the stuff that I was doing about performance decisions, about roles that we play, about creating experience and theater and business, I saw it then. And I didn't do anything with it because I thought it was too weird. And now here I am, 17 years later, and this is what I do all the time. So I would probably say to 21-year-old Mike, like, hey, go run with that because it's a good idea.
Again, with the acting, like, dude, it's your strong suit, bro. I would definitely dive back into it. I mean, you got a knack for it. Where can people find you? Like, how can I get people to connect with you that need help with leadership roles?
Yeah, so easy way. Once you figure out how to spell my last name, which if you're listening to this, you can probably see my last name there. Once you figure out that, I'm very easy because if you Google Mike Ganino, you will find me. I'm the only Mike Ganino, and it's Ganino. I'm not the only Mike Ganino. There's a lot of us, including my dad. But if you look up Mike Ganino on Google, I am the one who most likely shows up on the first page. So you can then find me anywhere: LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I don't really use Snapchat, so don't message me on Snapchat because I won't see it. But any of those other places, you can find me, message me. You can go to mikeganino.com, which is probably the website that will come up if you Google me. And send me a note. We can connect there and talk about ideas. I love chatting with people about what's going on. Also, the book is on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and everywhere you buy books. So it's Company Culture for Dummies. And again, Mike Ganino, you can look it up and you'll find me there. So yeah, I'm easy to find, all those places. I'd love for people to say hi and connect with me there. Tell me that you heard me here on Your Superior Self, so I know where we connected.
Absolutely. And one last curveball, because I can't stop throwing you them.
You should have been a baseball player.
I
dude.
should have, but I can't pitch. So talk to me up. I need a speech. I want you to talk to imagine that I'm the listener right now. I'm sitting here tuning you in on the radio or podcast on the laptop, or I'm in my car driving to work right now, and I am that leader that has problems connecting with my employees. I need some help from you. I need you to talk me up, give me some fire in my soul to be a better leader. How can I engage my frontline managers? How can I make an impact? How can I influence? Light me up, Mike.
So the very first thing I think you should do is really think about why that matters to you. So before, you go park your car in the parking lot and put a little timer on your phone for 10 minutes and sit in the parking lot, and on a napkin, on a notebook, on the back of an envelope, in your notes section of your phone, in an email to yourself, I want you to write out, what does the world look like if it's going the way you want it to go? So if you were a successful leader, if things were going the way you wanted, I want you to create that scene. I want you to literally be a writer, like a film writer, like a TV show writer. And I want you to describe in detail what's going on if everything's going well. And I don't want bullet points, and I don't want dream statements. I want you to pretend like you're a little bird floating above your life, your business, your team, if everything was going well. And I want you to describe what you see. Like, describe it as if it's a scene, not in bullet points, not in little scratch notes. I want you to write it out so that if I were to read it, if Trey were to read it, we would see exactly what you're saying as if it was a movie. I want you to get really clear on that, because the challenge is often we feel like we aren't creating the thing that we want. We feel like I don't have the business, or I don't have the team, or I'm not the leader I want to be. And the challenge is we haven't sometimes defined exactly what that looks like. And so we can either be chasing a phantom that doesn't exist, some type of world that doesn't exist, or we could be much closer to the thing that we want than we realized. And so my first thing to do is sit in your car 10 minutes, put a timer on the clock, and do not stop. You keep writing with your pen or tapping it out with your fingers if you're on your phone, and you keep going for 10 minutes and describe exactly what it all looks like if it's going successfully, as if you were watching a scene in a movie. Next, I want you to read that to yourself, and I want you to think about who in the business, if you were to walk in, you're walking into your business, to your shift, to your store, to your office, whatever it is, to your plant, whatever you're doing. And I want you to think. And I think of someone in there to say, who can I share this with? Who can I show? This is what I think we're trying to do if we're successful. This is what I think it looks like if we're winning. And I want you to show it to that person. And this is going to feel so weird. It's going to feel so awkward. You're not going to want to do this. You're going to think this is crazy. But I promise you, if you get really clear on what success looks like for you, and then you share that with someone else, and then consider, okay, so if that's what we're aiming for, what would we do different? This goes all the way back to the beginning of the show when I was talking about a GPS, that this little idea, this little snippet of what success looks like becomes your GPS. Now you know where you're aiming towards. Now you know what you're trying to create, and you have a better shot of getting there once you've defined it. Now, if the thing you wrote is like an idea of what a great business looks like, post it on the wall. Type that thing up and share it with everybody and say, hey, this is what I think we're trying to create. What do you think about that? How does this sit with you? What role do you want to have in that? And what I've seen over and over and over in all kinds of businesses, big businesses, small businesses, big teams and little teams, manufacturing plants to tech offices, is that when people do this exercise, when they define what it looks like when everything's going well, and then they share it with other people and say, how does this sit with you? What role do you want to have in this? How do you think we're doing towards achieving this? And what can we do different? Things really start to change, simply because you've defined the destination. And that is more than anything else. If you wanted to drastically impact some stuff today, I think that's what you could go do.
Thank you, sir. I want to say thank you for joining the show today. It has been an honor and a pleasure to talk to you and to speak to you and hear your story and to engage with your experiences, dude. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. It was really fun. And like I said, you got this interviewing thing down, buddy. This was a great interview. I appreciate it. Thanks.
I want to say thank you to Mike Ganino for coming on the show. I want to thank you, the listener, for downloading this podcast. I want to thank you for subscribing to the very first season of Your Superior Self. I cannot believe that this is the last episode of 2018. It seems like yesterday I just launched this bad boy. I cannot wait for 2019 and what the future holds for this podcast as well as myself. I want to say thank you again for listening. Thank you so much for all your support. Please follow me on Instagram at tdowns80 and on Twitter at downstrey. You can check me out on Facebook. I have a little group going on over there, Your Superior Self. 2019 is going to be fire. Make sure to follow me on all social media because I'm going to be dropping information about meetups and networking events that I'm going to try and have. I have this vision that I'm going to start next year. I don't want to ruin it for you, but stay tuned and follow me on all social media. That way you're not left behind. So with that said, let's get fired up over 2019. Let's make it the best year yet. Let's focus on our goals and make them come true. Let's do this together. I want to be a part of it. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for the support. And I cannot wait for 2019. Later.
My wrists, wake up, call Uber, then I'm blowing kisses to your bitch. I'm out here, I'm taking shots, and everyone is going.